PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a mental health condition that can develop in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event. Traumatic events that can trigger PTSD include physical or sexual assault, natural disasters, combat accidents, or other life-threatening experiences. People with PTSD often experience intrusive and distressing memories, flashbacks, nightmares, and emotional distress related to the traumatic event. They may also avoid reminders of the trauma, feel detached from others, experience negative changes in mood and thinking, and be hypervigilant or easily startled. PTSD can significantly impair a person's ability to function in daily life, including their ability to work, form relationships, and enjoy activities they used to find pleasurable. However, with proper treatment, many people with PTSD can learn to manage their symptoms and improve their quality of life. Treatment for PTSD may involve therapy, medication, or a combination of both. The symptoms of PTSD can be grouped into four main categories: intrusive thoughts and memories, avoidance, negative changes in mood and thinking, and changes in physical and emotional reactions. 1. Intrusive thoughts and memories. This category includes unwanted and distressing memories of the traumatic event, nightmares, and flashbacks. People with PTSD may also experience physical and emotional reactions when they are reminded of the trauma, such as sweating, rapid heart rate, or panic. 2. Avoidance. This category includes efforts to avoid reminders of the trauma, such as places, people, or activities that may trigger memories of the event. People with PTSD may also try to avoid talking about the trauma or may avoid thinking about it altogether. 3. Negative changes in mood and thinking. This category includes feelings of guilt, shame, and depression, as well as a loss of interest in activities that were once enjoyable. People with PTSD may also have negative thoughts about themselves, others, or the world around them. 4. Changes in physical and emotional reactions. This category includes hypervigilance, or being constantly on guard, and being easily startled. People with PTSD may also experience irritability, anger, or aggression, as well as sleep disturbances, such as insomnia. It's important to note that not everyone who experiences a traumatic event will develop PTSD, and the severity and duration of symptoms can vary from person to person. If you or someone you know is experiencing symptoms of PTSD, it's important to seek professional help from a mental health provider. In The Last of Us, both Joel and Ellie experience traumatic events that could potentially lead to PTSD. Joel, the main protagonist, is haunted by the memory of his daughter's death, which occurred during the early days of the fungal pandemic. He has survivor's guilt and is emotionally closed off from others, which may be a coping mechanism to protect himself from further emotional pain. Joel also experiences flashbacks throughout the game, which show the player his past and reveal the depth of his trauma. Ellie, the secondary protagonist, is exposed to a variety of traumatic events throughout the game, including witnessing the death of loved ones, being held captive and tortured, and killing infected and non-infected humans alike. These events take a toll on Ellie's mental health, causing her to struggle with survivor's guilt, anxiety, and depression. She also experiences flashbacks and nightmares that reveal the extent of her trauma. Overall, The Last of Us portrays the characters' experiences of trauma in a realistic and nuanced way, and the game highlights the importance of seeking professional help and emotional support when dealing with PTSD. In The Last of Us, both Joel and Ellie experience traumatic events that could potentially lead to PTSD. Here are some examples. Joel's daughter's death. Joel's daughter dies in his arms during the early days of the fungal pandemic. This traumatic event causes Joel to experience flashbacks and survivor's guilt throughout the game. Joel's brother's death. Joel's brother Tommy is presumed dead for a long time, and when they reunite, Joel discovers that Tommy has been traumatized by the events that have occurred in his absence. Ellie's captivity and torture. Ellie is held captive by David, a cannibalistic survivor, and tortured by him. She manages to escape, but the trauma of her experience is shown in her nightmares and flashbacks. Ellie's friend's death. Ellie's best friend, Riley, dies in front of her during the events of the DLC Left Behind. This traumatic event causes Ellie to experience survivor's guilt and depression. In The Last of Us Part 2, several characters experience traumatic events that can potentially lead to PTSD. Here are some examples. 1. Ellie's guilt and trauma. Ellie experiences trauma and guilt after the events of the first game, specifically the death of her friend, Riley. This trauma is compounded by the events of the sequel, which include the death of Joel, as well as a series of violent encounters and losses that Ellie experiences throughout the game. These events cause Ellie to have vivid nightmares and flashbacks. 2. Abby's trauma and guilt. Abby is a new character introduced in The Last of Us Part 2, and she experiences trauma and guilt due to her past actions. In the game, Abby is shown to be suffering from the trauma of her father's death, as well as the guilt of killing Joel. 3. Tommy's trauma and PTSD. Tommy is Joel's brother, and he also experiences trauma and PTSD as a result of the events of the first game. Tommy is shown to have severe physical and emotional scars due to the injuries he sustained during the events of the first game, and he experiences flashbacks and PTSD symptoms throughout the sequel. 4. Lev's trauma and PTSD. Lev is a new character introduced in The Last of Us Part 2, and he experiences trauma and PTSD due to his gender identity and his experiences as a member of a religious cult. Lev is shown to experience vivid nightmares and flashbacks related to the violence he experienced as a member of the cult. These are just a few examples of the traumatic events that occur in The Last of Us Part 2 and the impact they have on the character's mental health. The game portrays the effects of trauma in a realistic and nuanced way, highlighting the importance of seeking professional help and support when dealing with PTSD.